And as you can see, I'm by myself today. Jeff has gotten caught on a business call that is not wrapping up as quickly as he expected. So we're going to get started, and he is going to join us as soon as he can. Today, we are talking about establishing a company culture of emotional self awareness. This is something that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but it really is important as far as implementing emotional intelligence and having your team understand and be able to be emotionally self aware and live that out in the company. Setting up a culture where that is something that's how you function can bring a lot of value to your company and create one of the terms that's a buzzword these days, psychological safety for everyone in your organization. So, creating a company culture of emotional self, well, sorry, let me stop for a second. And if you're with us on the live stream, please let us know in the chat. Um, would love to have your input, especially since Jeff's not here to talk with me. It's always better to know that I'm talking to people who are out there and find out what kinds of things you're hearing, what kinds of things you want to know. Can I clarify something that you're hearing me say? So please let me know if there's something you have a question about. And of course, let us know you're with us. Um, Emotional self awareness, as we've been talking about for the last several weeks, is being able to name and respond to your emotions as opposed to react to them. Today, I'd like to talk about a framework that has been created by the Yale Social and Emotional Learning Group. This is part of their um, Yale Medical School. And it's a really interesting way to think about the skills of emotional intelligence. They use it with children in schools, but it works for all of us. So let me just go down through which each one of them is, and then we can talk a little bit maybe about some examples of these things. Excuse me. So we're using the word ruler, RULER. That's an acronym in this situation. And the first word we're going to think about is recognizing, the R in ruler. It's recognizing emotions in oneself and others. Obviously, we've been talking about this, the emotional self awareness. If you're not aware of your emotions, you really can't respond to them. But just because you're not aware of them does not mean that you're not acting them out. So, being able to recognize them and name them, we're going to talk about that in a second, is really important. The U in ruler is understanding the causes and consequences of emotions. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we said that we needed to get curious about where that emotion came from. The third thing is L, labeling the emotions with what they call a nuanced vocabulary. And this comes from what we were talking about a couple weeks ago when we talked about having the emotions, the feelings chart that has the really simple level of emotions, which are 7 or 8, depending on who you talk to, that goes out to then like 14 to 21. And then it goes out to much larger numbers. It gets exponential from there. But knowing that your emotion is bigger than just the 3 descriptions of mad, sad, and glad. Well, what is it within mad? Is it within sad? What is it within glad? And what about when you're feeling disappointed? Where does that fit in the whole grand scheme of things? And what does disappointed mean for you and for those who are around you that may define the word disappointed differently than you do? The E in ruler is expressing emotions, and this is critical, in accordance with cultural norms and social context. So, when you're with your best buddies and sitting around having a conversation, how you might talk about your response to an emotion looks different than when you're in a meeting with your team and something comes up and that same emotion might be fired in your brain. How you actually express it looks different. And we want to make our workplace, our company culture, a place where expressing emotions is safe. And it's safe for both the person who's expressing the emotion and the person who is on the receiving end of that emotion. Which leads us to the last letter, which is R, and that's regulating emotions by having helpful strategies, which this program teaches people strategies for managing their emotions. We're going to get into that a lot more deeply next month. But I wanted to share this acronym and this model because these skills can help people of all ages to use their emotions wisely, which helps us to succeed more effectively. And it really will help us to set ourselves up for success, not only as an individual, but as a member of a team. And when everyone on the team understands that we all need to practice these things, it will help these skills. It's going to help all of us work together more effectively and be able to trust each other moving forward. So let me give you an example of a situation that I was in a couple weeks ago where I unintentionally stepped in it. I know no one else who's on this call or is listening to it later has ever had this experience, she said sarcastically, because we've all been here. I'm a president of an organization, and I was bringing to the team a piece of information that we needed to start thinking about in how we spread the responsibility and develop the leadership pipeline for people to move into higher levels of leadership in the organization. So I shared a concept of we needed to have people outside the core team be the chairs of what I called ad hoc committees, because ad hoc committees is something that exists. It's a committee that has a specific purpose and it exists for a period of time until that purpose is accomplished, and then that committee goes away. That's what an ad hoc committee is. And we need to have people who are not on the core team chair those committees. As I said, it helps people develop their leadership skills and it builds the pipeline of potential leaders of the core team moving forward, which we all need to have those people because eventually we need to step down out of leadership and allow new thought processes to come into play and bring more people and involve them in the organization. Unfortunately, one of the people in the room couldn't hear what I was saying. And he was highly offended by my statement because what he was hearing is you can't be a member of the core team and also do the things that you really like to do in this organization. Just for the record, I had said nothing of the type. I had said nothing about, and if you want to be on the core team, you have to give up everything else that you love to do here. Not at all. That's not what I believed, nor do I believe it today. But this person really came at me about that because his emotions were so overwhelming for him because he felt attacked. I never said this person's name. I wasn't even talking about this person. I was just trying to help our organization become more healthy over time. But this person heard what I was saying as an attack on him. So he felt attacked. He felt judged. he felt that he had lost power, and none of this was true. So in my role, I had to recognize his emotions and, excuse me, help him to understand. I'm sorry, we've got a disconnect here. That is not what I said. I don't think you understood what I said. Let's back up and have a discussion about this. I couldn't get through to him. And he was fighting back at me and saying things that, quite frankly, were disconnected from the concept we were trying to share. I understood that he felt threatened, and I understood that he couldn't get to an understanding. So I had to step back in that moment. I think I said that before, and allow him to express what he was frustrated about. Because allowing him to express that frustration, now he was doing it in a way that was, instead of responding, he was reacting in the moment. I mean, I was sitting back because, quite frankly, I felt attacked by his response and his reaction to what I had said, because I was trying to figure out, where's this coming from? I'm not tracking with what he's saying about this. Excuse me. Eventually, it came out that what he was perceiving was that he was not allowed to be on the core team and do what he really wanted to do. He didn't understand that what he was talking about was not an ad hoc committee. But he couldn't hear that because his brain was flooding and he wasn't recognizing that the emotions that were causing him to feel this way were a misunderstanding of what was being said. It's really sad when that happens. And sometimes this happens in our companies. That's why creating a company culture of emotional self-awareness is really important. Because if we create that culture where each of us has the ability to recognize our own emotions as well as the emotions of the other person that we're interacting with, and then understanding the causes and consequences of our emotions, and then labeling those emotions. So if that person could have said, but I'm confused, but I feel threatened, but I don't understand why you think that I'm doing this. I could have said, I don't think you're doing anything. That's not what I said. Let's back up a minute. Which I did. I was saying that, but I couldn't be heard because this person was not able to get past that reacting part. He couldn't take a step back because he was feeling threatened by something that was not a threat to him at all. This is where the regulating your emotions and being able to think inside your own mind when you're in the middle of this kind of a situation is so critical. And fortunately, because I've been working on these things for a good long while, I was able in the moment to step back and let somebody else in the room give it a go to try to explain what was going on. It didn't have to be me that was the one who was making all the points. Let somebody else make some points too. But what that allowed to happen was it de-escalated the person's frustration. And it allowed everybody in the room to be able to breathe a little bit. So it's so important to have that space because we are going to get into situations in our company, in our work, where things aren't going to go the way we anticipated, and someone is going to hear something in a way that we didn't say it, or interpret something, a word that we use differently than how we meant it. And that's when we have to be able to be in that emotional self-awareness space of not saying, well, you're an idiot because you don't know what that word means, or of saying, that is not at all what I was saying. Because if you say that to them, they're not going to be able to hear you in that moment. Sometimes what they need to do and what you need to do is say, okay, clearly we need to take a break for a little bit. We will revisit this topic another time. Having this place where the culture is set that everyone recognizes the emotions, we understand the causes and consequences of our emotions and those of those around us, that we can label our emotions effectively, and everybody in the room knows that when I say that I'm feeling threatened, we get the same messaging around the word threatened. I don't know why threatened is the word, but that's the one for today. And critically expressing your emotions in accordance with cultural norms and social context. Jeff has a story. I really hope he can get on with this, because he was telling a story in our workshop last Friday about someone he used to work with who had a very different way of approaching meetings with other people and getting what they wanted. The emotional, expressing the emotions and the cultural norms and the social context that was critical, that this person could have benefited from learning some different ways to express their emotions and accomplish their goals, was really interesting to hear the story about. So hopefully, if he doesn't join us today, that story will probably come up another day, and I'm not going to try to tell it because he will tell it so much better than I did, because he was right in the middle of it. He was very involved in it and found a way through that this other person couldn't see because they didn't have the natural skills for it, and they needed someone to help them develop those skills. So that is an example of a place where coaching can be incredibly valuable for you, because you need someone to be able to help you think through, is this how I want to do this? How do I develop the skills to go in the direction I want to go in? And then regulating your emotions. The person that I was in that conversation with, within the larger group, was really having trouble regulating their emotions. I mean, they were threatening to leave the group and resign from their position because they thought that they were being told they couldn't do both things, which was the furthest thing from what was being said. So you need to be able to regulate, and you need to be able to have ways of just even being able to breathe. Last week, Gary was talking about diaphragmatic breathing, and that process can short circuit the runaway train of reacting instead of responding, just right there in the moment. When we learn those kinds of simple little things, it can really make a difference in our ability to stay present and stay calm in that crazy time. So it looks like Jeff's not going to be with us today, which is really a bummer, because I really wanted him to be able to share that story. But I think we got the point across that the skills of emotional intelligence, this emotional self-awareness skills, one way to remember them is the RULER acronym. And that is recognizing emotions in yourself and others. Excuse me. Understanding the causes and consequences of those emotions. Labeling those emotions with a nuanced vocabulary. E is expressing your emotions, because you need to express them. People need to understand where you're coming from and what your emotions are here. but you need to do it in accordance with cultural norms and social context. And here comes Jeff. Hey, nice timing. I was just reviewing. And the final R of ruler is regulating emotions using helpful strategies. So, Jeff, I'm going to bring you in.
Better late than never. The timing is impeccable today.
It most certainly is, because you know what I just got done saying? I just got done saying, I'm really bummed that Jeff couldn't be with us today because he had this great story that I really wanted to tell you, but I guess he's not going to be able to get off this phone call. So I was wrapping up. So guess what? It's going to be the B section or the second section, maybe not B section. B makes it sound like it's not as good as. That's not what I mean at all. But yeah, here we are. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. My timing is just right on spot today. As you were wrapping up, I was getting off, and then my computer did this funky thing, and I'm like, "Come on, I've got to get in."
I don't have time for this.
So
Yeah.
you get ready to grab the iPad. It ended up going. So
I know that feeling. I've been there and I've done that, and there are usually emotions involved with that.
yes, for sure. Especially not working as planned is always a bit of a challenge. We'll
Yeah,
just say.
that we could certainly say that. So, um, I'm throwing this at you. I texted you earlier about it, so it's not like you have no warning, but it might not be much warning because I have no idea whether you had time to read the text I sent you earlier this morning about, hey, you know that story you told last Friday in our workshop, which by the way was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. Um, the story that you told about the difference in approach
Oh,
that remember that story? Yeah, about the person who seemed to always be going in fighting the other people.
yeah.
So that really is something that has to do with emotional self awareness.
Yeah.
Because if you're emotionally self aware, you're really going to go into every conversation you have with somebody where you want to accomplish something and you want something from that conversation. I mean, personally, I'm not going to go in there and go, hey, look, if you don't let me do this, I'm going to make your life a living hell. I
It
would try not to do things that way.
is
Okay.
very smart advice not to go that.
Okay, so Jeff, tell us the story of what happened so we can learn from someone else's approach to emotional awareness versus how you approached the situation.
Yeah. So this was something that Rhonda and I did a workshop in with some hub participants last Friday. And one of the things that we were going through and walking through was one of the assessments that has to deal with really understanding yourself from kind of your needs, personality, how you show up, how you communicate with others, and where you're engaged and do your best work. And the example that I had shared was how you can take that knowledge of yourself and apply it to real life situations. So I had worked with someone at one point in time that was very direct, very action oriented, wanted dates to things, and things needed to be moving. Always in motion, kind of getting things done.
Not that that's a bad thing.
Great character. And in this particular situation, this person was had reached out to me because a team that I oversaw um, had responsibility for some things in the organization, and this leader had some needs that they wanted to tell me what they were going to do and give me an FYI. And basically, it was, hey, I'm going to call a meeting of these other executives. I need this. I'm telling them I need this. This is what needs to happen, and that your department will coordinate, and that's it. And I'm sitting there kind of listening to this and thinking, wow, this is going to be really not pleasant walking into if this is going to be the approach.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
Not suggested.
Yeah, a lot of executives with a lot of different personality types, egos, and this just, I don't see this going well and people taking well to this. So I had asked the person if they had um, an opportunity for some feedback on their approach and started just asking them, well, how do you think this would go? And I said, well, they'll probably not like it and want to argue, but I'll get one, basically, I'm going to get what I want. I said, well, could I offer maybe an alternative? And would you humor me and give me two 30-minute meetings instead of one 30-minute meeting to get I, the same thing that you're asking for? Because, yes, this is the most logical, most cost effective way to do this. There's really not another good option. But why don't I call the meeting and ask
Please.
everyone to bring their needs to this meeting around this particular topic? And that I would take that with my group, get everyone's input, and then come back with some alternatives or ways to achieve what everyone needed with costs and time and implication and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the person kind of begrudgingly said, yeah, but I guess that's fine. Because once we worked through and figured out this wasn't an urgent, right, that needed to be done in the next week and executed and everything. So we had the 30-minute meeting. I asked everyone for their needs. This leader, along with everyone else, gave me their needs, took notes, went away, went back to my team. We came up with options, the most cost effective, best time. All the things were what this particular leader had wanted a week prior, but it was just making sure people felt like they were engaged and involved in the discussion. Right?
And heard.
And there was going to be impacts to these other leaders, so making sure everyone felt like they were a part of it. And coming out of that, the second meeting, we went in, and this particular leader afterwards told me that they never would have thought to approach it this way, but no one pushed back, and it was exactly what they wanted. They, I believe, used the term, like, I don't know what kind of Jedi mind trick that you managed to pull, but I've never had a meeting that went like this, like on a topic like this. And we talked about that, and a lot of it was basically making sure, some of my strengths and things that I need to make decisions based on my personality was very different than this other leader's.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to use both of our strengths, we still got it done. So 30-minute meetings over the course of 7 days instead of one 30-minute meeting, and a lot of arguing and bickering for probably weeks of people not being happy. It was just a different style approach. And
Yeah, absolutely.
those different styles to your benefit, where, was this thing really urgent? No. Within 7 days, we got it done, which was completely acceptable. The thing didn't need done for 30 to 45 days anyway. So taking 7 days to kind of step this through made it a lot easier to get it over the goal line,
Right.
so to speak. And that was one of the examples I had shared with our hub participants on Friday, just around how you could leverage some of these assessments that we had taken them through to think about, and leveraging your strengths and your gifts and working with others, to help get things done.
It's really interesting. You're telling the story, and I respect the way you're telling this story, because the emotions really weren't front and center, but they were definitely underlying everything that's going on here. So I'm going to just go back to the leader who needed more space on their floor for their people. So that's why they came to you, right? That person was feeling powerful, but they were also, apparently, when they went into these meetings with other people and they basically told them this is what's what, and they don't ever allow for the conversation to lead them into where we need to go, there's almost a level of they were feeling powerful, but their power wasn't a confident power. They like had this power persona that they showed, but what may have been behind that was fear of I'm not going to get what I need, and so I have to be tough. I have to be unyielding, because if I give anything, then they're going to think that I'm a weenie. That's a very professional term to use.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's a super professional technical term today.
I'm sorry, it was describing where I needed to go, so there it went. But they're going to think that I'm not capable. I'm not as powerful of a leader as what I need to be in this situation. And if it's kind of that concept of, if I give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And I can't give them an inch because I can't afford a mile. So that's feeling threatened. That's feeling out of control, which sometimes is underneath that kind of, I'm going to rephrase that, often is underneath that kind of resistance to doing it through a conversation. Yeah. Telling versus engaging. You use that term, engage. I know you used that earlier in the conversation. So the people that are coming into this meeting with this person, I know on a regular basis, when they have a meeting with this person, is probably like, oh Lord, I can't wait for this one. Yeah. They're resistant, they're hesitant, they're girding themselves for the fight.
Yeah.
And instead, you're laughing internally because you're like, yeah, that's pretty much what every interaction with this person was.
Yep, it was.
Yeah. Instead, approaching it the way you did, by putting another alternative out there that really helped her express not only her emotions, but her needs in a way that can be accepted in the social context, provides for much more productive emotions all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really, to me, a lot of what we've been talking about this morning, being able to take that step back and really see, is this an emotional reaction to needing or wanting something versus a logical, okay, I can still get there, but maybe the path needs to meander a little bit.
That's a great way to express it. Yeah.
Or I think the other thing I shared with the group is, at times where that emotional reaction could be is that you've already gotten onto the highway and are going 70, 75, and your team's still on the on-ramp trying to get up to speed, right? Because you've had time to think about these things,
yes.
Inputs and the outputs, and you've spent time with a particular decision or direction that needs to go. And sometimes when it's the first time the team's hearing it, they're 50 miles away from where you're at, and you're already up to cruising speed on the highway, and they're still getting on the on-ramp somewhere.
And that is so critical to be aware of when you are in that first meeting with your team, with another part of the organization that you're working with. We have to recognize, and so I was telling a story from my leadership where I used a term that I thought everybody understood, but people were very resistant, and they were oh my gosh, the reactivity from one person in particular was really fascinating.
Yeah.
But part of that is because just because you think everybody in the room understands what a word means does not mean they do.
Yeah, so very true.
And so we have to set the baseline of, okay, here are the meanings of the words that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Emotional self-awareness is so critical. And in the month of June, we are going to dig in to emotional self-management. Actually, it's self-management, emotional self-control is one component of that. There's emotional self-control, adaptability, achievement orientation, and positive outlook. So those are the things we have to look forward to talking about in June.
Yeah, hard to believe we're already into almost June.
Oh my gosh.
Through
Totally. Just this year's over. We're going to be with you next week because Jeff and I are celebrating Memorial Day and taking the week off.
Yes, we are. So we will be back live and in person on June 5th.
Thank you for knowing what date it was.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I just clicked over to my calendar to skip ahead, make sure I could do that segue
Yep.
smoothly. So yeah, June 5th, 12:15 Eastern time.
We'll be back with you. Yep. Hey, Jeff, have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Yes.